Effective coaching and learning. The following presentation explains and discusses the effectiveness of various codes, guidelines, protocols, and practices used by coaches to assess and manage the needs of the performers, athletes, and sportspeople in their charge. Before we look at some examples of codes, guidelines, and practices that every coach must follow, it's important to look at the basic requirements of a coach. Besides teaching their sport, every coach must behave in an ethical way. Ethics are the idealistic standards of right and wrong. This differs from the morals, which are the personal rules and habits by which a person lives. Regardless of the coach's personal morals, he must behave according to the ethics of which he represents. This means knowing right from wrong, making judgments on what behavior is deemed appropriate, and being moral, according to the sport and club rules. But why do we need to be aware of ethics? Well, in sports coaching, there are many situations in which it is vitally important for the coach to behave in a manner which is correct, befitting of the sport and club he represents, and shows respect for the sportspeople he is working with. For example, cultural differences. Sometimes what is ethical in one setting might not be in another. The power difference between the coach and the participants should not be abused. The lure of a prize can tempt people into behaving unethically. Some sportspeople will use drugs to enhance their performance, and it is really important to understand that coaches are the heroes for younger participants, so it's essential to set a good example. So how can we ensure that coaches behave in an ethical way? Well, there is a wide range of documentation in place covering all aspects of the coaching situation to ensure that the athletes can learn in a safe and protected environment. Codes of conduct, governing how coaches should behave. There are also codes of conduct for sportspeople or club members. Guidelines, covering topics such as health and safety, how to carry out risk assessments, or how to assess a performer prior to starting a training program. And protocols and practices to ensure the safety of the sports participants. A code of conduct is basically a set of rules which are written by companies or bodies to ensure that the coaches behave in the right way. It provides them with expectations of how to act. This is a massive advantage in a situation which there might be conflict. There are also codes of conduct for participants. If someone behaves unethically, they might try and talk their way out of it and try to discuss with his or her manager. But since they had agreed to the code of conduct and had not fulfilled their expectations, it will be clear to the manager and coach there will be consequences. Such consequences will be clearly laid out in the code of conduct. If there were no codes of conduct, it is likely there will be far more unethical behavior, which would lead to sports facilities getting bad reputations and probably fewer members. The disadvantage about codes of conduct is that in most situations they are written in a negative way, saying what behavior should be avoided rather than what behavior is desirable. Some codes can be quite detailed, so they can take time to read and fully understand. There are also many different codes of conduct depending on the sport and the club, although all promote ethical behavior. It is difficult for each code to cover all situations, which means the club have to hope that the coaches and participants will cooperate with a good team spirit and without conflict. Basketball England's code of conduct is simple and easy to understand. They try and promote points such as equality, patience, confidence, respect, and so on. As they say, it's pretty basic stuff, but they also provide a code of conduct to match officials as well. Health and safety guidelines are important to assess risks and protect athletes from injuries. They aim to ensure that the risks are reduced to avoid any injury occurring. In any event of an accident, the guideline was provide a coach with a procedure and strategies on how to assess the accident or injury and how to deal with it. Health and safety guidelines ensure a safe environment for the participants. Whatever the sport, the aim is to minimize the risk of an injury during activities. There are also procedures in place that coaches know how to handle an incident. This helps to avoid panic and make sure the injured person gets dealt with correctly. Poor guidelines could lead to higher risk of injury, and if an injury is handled incorrectly, this could lead to even more damage. This health and safety guideline from England Squash clearly states the responsibilities of the coach and specifies what the coach should know and be able to do if something goes wrong. It is the responsibility of the coach to make sure he has all the required knowledge of the safety procedures detailed in the guideline. Part of the health and safety guideline is to carry out a risk assessment. The coach needs to check all aspects of the training situation to ensure the environment is safe for both him and the participants. It is up to him to recognize and control hazards. The protocol is usually like a checklist with everything that needs to be considered, and it is different depending on the sport and the environment. If one were to coach outside, there could be a risk of slipping on wet grass or tripping on a twig from a nearby tree. On the other hand, doing the same sport in a sports hall could have risks of mats moving out of place or slipping and then hitting the wall, for example. Ideally, the coach should carry out his own risk assessment by visiting the venue before the actual lesson for far greater safety. If an injury were to occur, and obviously no one hopes that it doesn't, the risk assessment is a way of showing proof that the coach has tried to ensure full safety for the players and helps to find out why the accident took place. Unfortunately, the risk assessment can't cover every eventuality, and it takes time and effort to prepare and complete, which can put many coaches off from doing a risk assessment. This example of a risk assessment from British Judo shows how the checklist format is well structured and easy to use. The coach is required to sign and date the form. PARQ stands for Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire. This questionnaire is used to assess a person's current health status, medical history and level of fitness prior to beginning of any sporting activity. This questionnaire enables the coach to quickly get to know the participant. The main aim of the questionnaire is for the coach to establish the right activities and suitable training schedules to fit the needs of the participant. However, the success of the questionnaire depends on the participant being honest about their health and fitness. The information collected can also go out of date quickly, so the PARQ may need to be repeated from time to time. The Athlete Fit PARQ consists of several health-related questions. It is important that the coach ensures the participant signs and dates the PARQ to protect himself in the event of anything happening to the participant. Emergency protocols include detailed instructions on how the coach and participants should act. It is important that the coach knows procedures for a fire, evacuation, first aid, and mobile phone procedures. In the example of a fire, there should be a plan which details both the primary and secondary evacuation routes and the assembly points. The location of the fire extinguishers and the fire alarms should be included, as well as the emergency phone numbers. It is vital that the coach checks the register to ensure that no student, teacher, or coach remains inside the venue. Participants should never be left alone during an emergency procedure or evacuation. We do not want to leave anybody behind. It is also important to note when someone has gone to the toilet or to the car, so that they can be accounted for. The precise protocols will be defined according to the sport and the venue. In the event of an accident, protocols will be in place for administering first aid, such as, first and foremost, don't move the victim unless absolutely necessary. If the emergency service need to be called, the coach needs to know how to explain the nature of the medical emergency, the location, and the number from which the call is made. Procedures will also be in place to provide care before the emergency service arrive, such as compressing wounds which are bleeding, although the emergency helpline can also provide immediate advice. Having an emergency protocol is a massive advantage and is a must for all companies. It must be clearly written and easy to understand. It must be kept up to date and all our employees must read it and learn it, even if it might be several pages long. Following any incident, however, even minor accidents, it will be necessary to complete an accident report. An accident report is very easy to fill in. The person in charge simply fills in the details of the incident, including the date and place, which session, the injured person's name and address, what injury the person had, and precisely how it took place, and who was contacted, and more. This form provides a better understanding of how the accident took place and why it was not prevented. One hopes that it's not because of an insufficient training or faulty equipment, because this could lead to consequences for the coach. Abuse of children and vulnerable adults is a very sensitive topic, and the coach has a big responsibility in identifying the signs and symptoms of the various forms of abuse: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. Once again, the coach has procedure to follow and must document everything the participant tells him or what he has seen. He is also duty-bound to pass on the information to the person responsible for safety in line with the club's policy. If this person is not available, there are services which are contactable 24/7. The coach has to react immediately if a child is in danger. Even if the coach is not sure, he must still report it. Such protocols protect the most vulnerable members of our society. Challenges arise because of the abuse is often at the hands of someone known to the child and perhaps even to the coach. This might make it difficult for a coach to take the first formal step of reporting potential abuse. Particularly, it is just a suspicion. However, the protocols should give clear guidance on what to do. A coach can have a big influence on a child's life. Some may have even seen the child grow up. He is looked up to and is in a position of trust. These steps explain what to do if a child discloses abuse. The most important thing is to believe the child. The protocols in place will help ensure a calm procedure in which the safety of the child is utmost. The Child Protect in Sport unit is a partnership between the NSPCC and Sport England, which was founded in 2001. Its aim is preventing children from being abused during sporting activities. Sadly, unethical coaches violated the positions of trust. The policy statement shown here is a template of organizations to use acknowledge their commitment to safeguard and promote the welfare of children. So, there is a multitude of different codes, guidelines, protocols in existence, covering all aspects of sports coaching. A lot of them define what the coach must do and are aimed at protecting the participants. However, by following all the rules and regulations and completing all the associated forms as required, the coach is also protected in the event that something doesn't go according to plan. In all, the goal to provide a safe environment for the teaching, learning, and enjoyment of sports.